Jack Harmon wiped sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of grease across his forehead. The small garage that served as his workshop was sweltering in the summer heat, despite the 3 industrial fans he'd strategically positioned around the space. His gray mechanic's uniform clung to his muscular frame as he hunched over the alien communication device he was repairing. "Damn Praxian tech," he muttered, adjusting his work gloves. Always putting the power couplings where no human fingers were meant to reach. Jack had carved out a niche for himself on this border planet, one of the few places where humans and various alien species coexisted in something approaching harmony. After leaving Earth's military 5 years ago, he'd found his skills at repairing and modifying technology were in high demand among the non-human population, who found human ingenuity both baffling and valuable. A soft shuffling at the open garage door made him look up. There she was again, the little alien girl with skin the color of spring lilacs and hair like flowing lavender silk. She stood barely 3 feet tall, with delicate pointed ears that twitched occasionally as she watched him work. Her large, curious eyes followed his every movement. "Hey there, little one," Jack called out, his deep voice softening. "Come to watch the human fix things again." The child nodded, taking a tentative step into the garage. Jack had never learned her name or exactly where she lived. She'd simply appeared one day about 3 months ago, and had been a regular visitor ever since. He assumed she was from one of the Nolarian families that lived in the upscale district a few blocks away. "Well, come on in then. Just don't touch anything that glows, smokes, or makes funny noises." He gestured to a small stool he kept nearby. It had become her spot. The girl scampered over and climbed onto the stool, her movements graceful despite her small size. She wore a simple silver tunic that seemed to shimmer in the light, typical of Nolarian children's clothing. "Want to see something cool?" Jack asked, picking up what looked like a twisted piece of metal. When he pressed a hidden button, it unfolded into a perfect geometric shape that pulsed with soft blue light. "It's a Tandorian puzzle box. They use them to teach their kids spatial reasoning." The girl's eyes widened with delight, her small hands reaching out before pulling back, remembering his rule about not touching. "It's okay," Jack said, placing it gently in her tiny palms. "This one's safe." As she turned the object in her hands, Jack returned to his work, occasionally glancing up to make sure she was all right. There was something about her quiet presence that made his otherwise solitary days more bearable. He'd never been much for talking, but he found himself narrating his work when she was around. "See, the trick with these Praxian communicators is that they're designed for beings with 6 fingers, he explained, pointing to the interior components. "But if you bypass this circuit here and reroute through the secondary power node, you can make it work with just 5. The girl nodded as if she understood every word, her attention completely focused on him. Jack couldn't help but smile. Most of the locals treated him with a mixture of respect and wariness, humans still being relatively uncommon this far from Earth. But this child showed no fear, only curiosity. As the afternoon wore on, Jack completed his repairs on the communicator and moved on to modifying a standard hover scooter for a Dralaxian client whose body structure made the human design controls impossible to use. "Hand me that plasma cutter, would you?" he asked, pointing to a tool on the bench near the girl. She hopped down from her stool and carefully picked up the tool, bringing it to him with a solemn expression that made him chuckle. "Thanks, assistant." He winked at her, and for the first time he was rewarded with a shy smile that transformed her delicate features when the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the workshop floor. The girl slipped off her stool and headed toward the door. "Heading home?" Jack asked, setting down his tools. "Same time tomorrow?" She nodded, her silky purple hair catching the last rays of sunlight as she disappeared around the corner. Jack stretched his back, feeling the satisfying pop of his spine after hours of hunched work. He never questioned why a child so young was allowed to wander alone, or why she spent hours watching the human mechanic instead of playing with others of her kind. On this border planet, different species had different customs, and he'd learned long ago not to impose human expectations on alien cultures. But when 3 days passed with no sign of the little visitor, Jack found himself growing concerned. He caught himself glancing toward the door more frequently, expecting to see her small figure silhouetted against the sunlight. By the 4th day, a knot of worry had settled in his stomach. "She's probably just busy," he told himself as he closed up shop that evening. Or her family took a trip. But something didn't feel right. And Jack Harmon had learned to trust his instincts that by the 5th day. With no sign of the little alien girl, Jack's worry had transformed into resolve. After closing his shop early, he traded his grease-stained work uniform for the cleanest clothes he owned, a simple navy shirt that stretched across his broad shoulders and dark pants that had seen better days but were at least free of engine oil. Nalarian Quarter lay just beyond the commercial district, its architecture a stark contrast to the utilitarian buildings that dominated the rest of the settlement. Elegant structures with sweeping curves and iridescent surfaces caught the late afternoon light, creating prismatic patterns on the polished walkways. Jack felt conspicuously out of place as he entered the district, his heavy boots echoing against the smooth stone paths. Humans rarely ventured into this part of the settlement. It wasn't forbidden exactly, but the unspoken boundaries between species were typically respected. "Excuse me," he said, approaching a Nalarian male tending to a garden of bioluminescent plants. "I'm looking for a little girl, about this tall." He held his hand at waist height. "Purple hair. Visits my repair shop sometimes." The gardener straightened, his expression unreadable to human eyes. Why would a human seek a Nalarian child? His voice carried the musical lilt characteristic of his species. "She's been coming to my workshop for months," Jack explained, trying to keep the frustration from his voice. "She hasn't been by in almost a week. I'm concerned." The gardener's pointed ears twitched slightly, a sign of discomfort. Jack had learned from his limited interactions with the species. "Many families live here," the gardener said finally. "I cannot help you." Jack thanked him anyway and continued deeper into the district. Similar conversations with other Nalarians yielded equally unhelpful responses, ranging from polite dismissal to barely concealed suspicion. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows between the elegant buildings, Jack was ready to admit defeat. That's when he overheard a conversation between 2 Nalarian females walking ahead of him. "Poor little Leary," one was saying. "Such a tragedy for one so young." "The House of Talon has suffered much already," replied the other. "First Lord Talon's son in the border dispute, and now his granddaughter's accident." Jack slowed his pace, staying just close enough to hear without appearing to eavesdrop. "I heard she was playing near the old energy conduits," the first continued. "A surge damaged her optical nerves. The healers say the damage is permanent." Jack's heart sank. It had to be her, his little visitor. Blind, the thought of those curious bright eyes, darkened forever, made his chest tighten painfully. He approached the pair, clearing his throat. "Pardon me. I couldn't help overhearing. This girl, Leary, does she have a habit of wandering off, visiting the commercial district?" The 2 Nalarians exchanged glances. "You're the mechanic," the taller one said finally. "The one who fixes impossible things." Jack nodded, surprised at being recognized. "Leary has spoken of you," she admitted. "She finds your human methods fascinating. Is she all right?" Jack asked, concern evident in his voice. The Nalarians exchanged another look. "She lives," the taller one said, "but her sight is gone. For a Nalarian, it is difficult. Our species relies heavily on visual processing. Without it, she is cut off from much of our culture." our learning methods. Jack processed this information, his mind already racing with possibilities. Where can I find her? The House of Talon, you said? Back in his workshop, Jack pulled out his collection of salvaged tech components and began sketching designs on his tablet. If Nularians processed visual information differently than humans, perhaps their optical systems could be bypassed entirely. He'd worked on sensory augmentation devices before, though never for a species with such complex neural pathways. Hang in there, little one, he murmured as he began assembling the first prototype. Jack's going to fix this. For 3 days he barely slept, subsisting on caffeine and determination. He called in favors from contacts across the settlement, trading services for specialized components he couldn't fabricate himself. By the 4th day, he had created a sleek visor that would translate various environmental inputs, heat signatures, sonic reflections, electromagnetic fields, into neural signals that could bypass damaged optical nerves. It wasn't perfect. The resolution would be lower than natural sight, and it would take time to learn to interpret the new sensory information. But it was a start, a way for Lyri to navigate her world again. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when Jack heard the soft chee